What's good, everybody? It's the Clown with Cap Show. UFC 279 was iconic. I told you guys to go heavy on the money line with Nate Diaz. It cashed out. I love it, dude. Nate Diaz, one of the truest warriors that the UFC has ever seen. I don't think this is going to be the last time we do see Nate Diaz in the UFC. I do think in the future, Dana White, a great businessman, successful. I think they're going to come up with something unique where it's like, hey, let's sign a 2-fight deal where at least one of the fights you're going to fight a trilogy with Conor McGregor. I think that's going to do crazy good numbers just like it has done in the past. So I think that's what they're going to work. But we're hearing that Nate Diaz could go over to boxing, start boxing other boxers, just do something different. But I think Nate Diaz, whatever he goes into, he's going to be successful. There's a reason he's been fighting for years upon years, to over 2 decades. I mean, Nate Diaz, dude, he's really defined the odds here to whereas most champions that come and go, look, they only stay in about 5 years. Although Nate Diaz was never a UFC champion, never had the belt. But overall, dude, I mean, Nate brings the fight for the fans, for the business. He's just a win-win situation for the UFC, or if he goes to boxing or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, Nate Diaz is a G, man, top G, triple G. And I called this out. I can't believe come fight time it was plus 120 on the Diaz money line. I said go heavy on that, go double, triple, put your mortgage payments on it, put everything that you own on Nate Diaz, and it will cash you out. And it did. I would say the first round was Tony Ferguson, and that's it. And then we saw in the second round and the third round, we saw the choke that Nate Diaz does so many times. And it just goes to show you that Tony Ferguson, the reason I went against him was he was on a 4-fight losing streak until that fight over the weekend. And it was evident to me that it was Nate Diaz's time to win. You know, we saw Chimaev come in overweight, 8.5 pounds overweight, just undisciplined, unprofessional. I mean, yes, he's 28, but it's just like, dude, like, I get it. He's a great, great fighter, but it's like, we haven't really seen much of Chimaev yet. We haven't, dude. He hasn't really been tested like that, you know, in the Gilbert Burns fight. But, dude, Gilbert Burns in the top 5. He's not the champion, dude. So, like, you know, all this hype, all this stuff, I want to see him fight really a hard fight here. You know, maybe Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, even Leon Edwards, someone like of that type of nature, someone in the top 3 up at the top. But I just think for Nate, man, I think that everything's going in his favor right now. So Nate can do so many different things. He fought his last fight on the UFC contract. So I think Dana and him are going to talk about this and be like, hey, what's next for you? You know, what do you want, Nate? I think Nate has the leverage from the UFC to be like, hey, this is what I want. I want the McGregor fight come spring or summertime of 2023. That's what I want. I want to do big numbers. I want to do big fights, just like he's done in the past at UFC 196, UFC 202. The list goes on and on. I mean, Nate's been in so many high top card fights where it's like, dude, Nate deserves that leverage. Nate can ask really any fight he wants next and get it from the UFC and from Dana White, and they should make that happen. So I think that's great. But for Tony Ferguson on the flip side, look, for Tony, I do think he should hang it up soon. I don't know how many fights he has left on the UFC, but I just think for Tony Ferguson, he's towards the end of his career, been in the UFC for a while, been in the fight game for years upon years. So I think for Tony Ferguson, he's still a legend. He's still a Hall of Famer in my book. He's awesome, dude. So just because he took a couple L's here and there towards the end of his career doesn't mean he's terrible. No, it just means, hey, that his prime's passed and it's time to move on. So I think I could see Tony Ferguson getting into coaching, something in that aspect. But, you know, hats off to Tony Ferguson. What a main event card. It was awesome. And then we got the Chimaev versus Kevin Holland. This was really a crazy first really fight for both of these guys coming in, where it was just like, wow. I mean, the first minute was all grappling. They were just squirming around. And then we saw Chimaev really get a hold of Kevin Lee, ended up making him tap out. But I just think for Kevin Lee, dude, there was definitely a weight advantage, I thought, in this fight. It was definitely clearly shown. I thought Chimaev was like 20 pounds over, what was it, 178 or something? Dude, he looked like he was 195 coming into this fight. He looked like he was really overweight. I don't know if that's just because he's big, or maybe Chimaev should go to light heavyweight. You know, I think there's so many different lanes that Chimaev could do. For Kevin Holland, look, you know, it was a good fight as long as it lasted. I was not going to go Kevin Holland. The only opportunity Kevin Holland had was not defending the takedown, which was unsuccessful, and just keeping this fight on the feet the whole time. That was his only option here, and he failed to do that. So that's why I went Chimaev. On this crazy parlay was Chimaev, Nate Diaz. That was a crazy parlay. And also, you know, the Johnny and Irene parlay as well. I mean, you could have done a 5-fight parlay, even though I did do a 5-fight parlay. And Lee, really, I thought Daniel Rodriguez lost that fight. I thought he got snubbed. He won by split decision, and clearly I thought Lee was in control of that fight. I thought he'd throw more punches in that fight. So I just looked at it like, wow, dude, that's what you have to do when you're a fighter. You cannot let it go to the judges' scorecard. You just can't, dude. You can get screwed, and this was a very close fight. I just thought the tempo, the momentum was in Lee's favor. That's why I went Lee. I mean, it would have cashed out, hit crazy, but it's hard to hit 5 fights, especially in the main card, 100%, but at least four fights hit for me with Johnny, Irene, Nate, and Chimaev. But for Chimaev, it's just like, what's next for him? I mean, is he going to get a top 3 guy? Who knows? I just think they need to discipline him in some way. I mean, 8.5 pounds overweight, dude. This is unacceptable. It's so unprofessional. You cannot do this, dude. This is his biggest fight of his career, and he comes in overweight. I can't believe it, but, big win by Chimaev. Great win. And then Irene, another great win. We saw the kick that she threw on her, and really, I thought it was an illegal kick, but it wasn't. It was a kick right by her ribs and her stomach, and she went down like a bag of ice, and really, it was all Irene. And Irene, there was a couple times in this fight where Irene was getting tested, was getting hit, and really, for a minute there, I was like, man, this fight really turning around where it's like the underdog might be Irene until we saw that kick in the body where it's just like, wow. And she was on her back when she threw it, which was even more crazier. So I went heavy on Irene. That cashed out. And then we saw Johnny with the submission victory. Hey, shout out to Johnny, man. Look, the last couple fights that I've seen him, he really got messed up, jacked up. So this was a big bounce back win for Johnny. No doubt about it, dude. After getting, really, really bad KO, from just standing up and just falling down, dude. It was crazy, but big win by Johnny. But first and foremost for Nate Diaz, man, the true G, triple OG. I'm telling you right now, Nate Diaz has all the leverage in the world right now to really do what he wants to do, even dealing with business in the UFC. I think like I said, he's going to get that fight with McGregor. He's going to get a couple fights, even against a rematch against Masvidal. That fight was a doctor stoppage in the 4th round, or maybe even in the 5th. I think it was the 4th, but somewhere there it was just like, maybe get a rematch with him, and we even said Nate brought him back to life, brought Masvidal back to life, after all that stuff. I just think we need to throw Nate Diaz in there again, dude. He's just great business for the UFC, and I think fans around, the fight game fans especially around the world, they love Nate Diaz. I mean, who doesn't, dude? We're talking about a guy who has no fear, who's not scared to say what he wants, who's not scared to fight anybody on planet Earth right now. And we even brought up Khabib's name, even Khabib's team. He slapped Khabib in the face, and all of his homies, about 12 deep, they didn't do nothing, and Nate Diaz is out in the parking lot waiting for him. And Nate Diaz said they ran off. You know what I'm saying? Nate Diaz is really about that life. He's about that street life. He's about that fight life. And he wants to scrap, dude. He wants to scrap, most and foremost, dude. He's ready for the scrap. So I think that's why everybody loves him, including me, dude. I think Nate Diaz deserves anything he wants. I think he will go and transition into boxing, maybe even fight Jake Paul somewhere in there. We even said that fight would be a great fight, do good numbers. But I just think Nate Diaz can do that, though. He can transition into boxing and really be successful. We saw McGregor, but McGregor fought the GOAT in Floyd Mayweather, so that was tough, dude. It's tough to beat the GOAT. I mean, dude, he lasted 10 rounds. I mean, homage to Conor for doing that. No other UFC fighters have ever done that. It's transitioned into the UFC, into boxing, dude, and did that crazy numbers, made over $100 million off it. Dude, that is just insane to me. No one will ever probably do that in my lifetime, in your lifetime, where Conor McGregor, for instance, guys like him, who big stars in the UFC, then they're like, hey, let me go fight boxers now. Let me go into the boxing fight, the GOAT, Floyd Mayweather. That doesn't happen, dude, and it did already, and it lasted 10 rounds, so I thought that was good, but I think we could see Nate kind of do the same thing McGregor did, transition into that boxing scene, and really, if he doesn't want to go back in the UFC, just stay in that boxing realm and just make money off that. So I think it's a win-win for Nate, whatever he does. I just think overall, I do want to see him fight McGregor. I do. I think that's the best money fight possible for both of these guys right now. I mean, if McGregor fought, Poirier again, I don't think that would really entertain the fans. I mean, I just think for McGregor right now, the hunger's gone. We can clearly see that, the hunger, the passion, just, hey, the everyday hunger, right, of just getting better, striving to get better, that's lost now, dude. That's what sometimes money can do. It can change people in a different ways, and I think in a different way for McGregor was, hey, I'm a little bit more lazy now. I can do this and that, whatever the case is, but I definitely, the UFC and Dana White, they understand Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor are the fight to make in the UFC in the future, and if they miss out on this opportunity, they're missing out on millions of dollars for both the UFC and these fighters, dude, and all the fighters under the card of McGregor Diaz. So I think that this fight will happen. It's got to happen. And Chimaev, for him, fight a top 3 guy. You know, I'm really sick and tired of hearing all this hype. Fight Usman then. You know, fight Usman. Fight one of these guys that can wrestle with you. Fight Covington. You know, that's what I would love to see. I'd love to see Chimaev versus Covington and get in there. And they're both great wrestlers. That might even cancel out and stay on the ground. But I just want to see something. But, you know, shout out to Nate Diaz, the 209. I told you guys to go heavy on the money line. Make you guys millionaires. It's the Cloudwood Cab Show. Let's go!